Hey guys, hope you're doing really well. Today we're going to be doing an update of the tank behind me, which is my shallow tank. It's 60 centimeters long. It's actually a ADA 60F aquarium. The plants are thriving in here. We've got a UG carpet and it is doing really well. I'm trimming it really low to try and get that kind of golf putting green look. Hopefully I get there one day. And we're just going to be going through a general update, doing the general maintenance, talking about the lighting, the filtration, the plants inside, what I do from week to week, just a general update, and hope you enjoy it. So I thought it'd be a good idea to start with some of the equipment I'm using on this tank. As you can see on top, I'm using a Twinstar 600 CA light. It's the version 2, so it's last year's model, but I'm really happy with it. It's just a brilliant light, great color rendition, and the plant growth is phenomenal. I run my lighting about 7 hours a day, and I do have a little ramp up period of about 15 minutes either side of that. I use a little controller, a light controller. It also dims the light if I need, but I run it on 100%. Right now it's on a wee bit lower percentage because of the camera. If I put it on 100%, you'd be blinded by the light. But generally on a day-to-day basis, I run it on 100% light 7 hours a day. I'm running a full CO2 art kit on this tank, so as you can see, the Bazooka diffuser. I'm also using the Pro SE regulator underneath as well, and I'm running it on a SodaStream canister. You have to have an adapter for that, but CO2 art also sells that. I'll leave a link in the description for a 10% discount if you're really interested in CO2 art products. The filtration on this tank is an Awazi 100 Thermo Filto Smart. Super happy with these filters. I've been using them for a while now, and in multiple tanks I have, and I recommend them. If you've got a tank this size, the Filto Smart 100 is perfectly fine in my opinion. And if you've got something larger, they do the Biomasters as well. I'm not sponsored by them, but great brand, and I'm super happy with the products. My maintenance routine week to week is a water change of about a third of the water of the tank, and I just do that at the weekend. I use RO water and I remineralize with salty shrimp GHKH+. It's quite simple. I don't do much more than that, apart from general clean the glass, trimming the plants. Although in this tank there's not a lot of that, apart from the carpet, which I try to trim fairly often. The UG carpet I try to trim because if I don't, then it might have a tendency to lift up and float. But other than that, quite an easy tank to maintain, and I try to stick to that routine every week. Since I started this tank, I've been using APT Complete fertilizer, and I found that it's actually one of my favorite fertilizers, all-in-one fertilizers that I've ever used. I'm quite impressed with it, in fact, and I highly recommend anyone try it. I'm not sponsored or anything like that by them, but I'm really happy with it, and it's not super lean. It's not like an ADA fertilizer where it's extremely lean, but it's not in the territory of EI either. It's somewhere in the middle. The carpet I'm using in this tank is known to be quite a difficult plant in the hobby. It's a UG, and a lot of people have a lot of struggles with that. There seems to be a lot of guidance out there telling people how to grow this plant, and a lot of strict guidelines in that you shouldn't say add any fertilizer, or if you are adding fertilizer you shouldn't add a lot of it, or you shouldn't add nitrogen. And that maybe be somewhat true, possibly, but tell you what, I've been adding not a lean fertilizer. It's not lean, it's certainly not heavy, to this tank, and I've had absolutely no problems. The plant is growing really well. It's actually planted in a nutrient rich aqua soil as well, Tropica aquarium soil. So I understand what they're saying, that maybe this plant doesn't like as heavy nutrient dosing in the water column and in the substrates. But in my experience, I wouldn't change your fertilizing regime just for this plant. I would just try and keep it as simple as possible. Don't change your routine of what you would do in a normal tank. Just grow this plant like you would any other, apart from a couple little things that you might want to look out for when growing this plant. I recommend when you're starting off and you're planting the UG, I recommend that you plant quite deeply into the substrate. I've used a Tropica aquarium soil powder. It's a finer granule, and I found that this helped with the tiny little roots of the UG. But I definitely plant really deep, because if you're not planting quite deeply into the substrate, when you fill it with water, UG has a tendency to float. As we know, UG is actually somewhat of a floating plant, and it kind of attaches itself to surfaces as it floats in the water. So It's not actually, meant to be a carpeting plant per se. Keeping it deep into the substrate really does help, keeping it down there, because if you've ever grown it before, it has a real tendency to float. Another tip when growing UG, I highly recommend you trim it fairly often. This will avoid it overlaying itself, growing really thick and really tall, and therefore underneath the healthy growth, you might actually get some dead growth, and then that might lead to some problems in excess nutrients, etc. So trimming it really frequently actually is a good thing, and it looks great when you trim it frequently as well, because it does look like a putting green. For the hardscape in this tank, I've used some black lava rock, which I got from a company called Strideways Worldwide, and on top of that I've placed some driftwood, as well as on top of the driftwood I've planted some Hemianthus cuba. This plant isn't known to be an epiphyte plant. Some people actually say it's impossible to grow it as an epiphyte plant, but I've kind of proven them wrong, I suppose, by growing it here, and it's thriving. Just below that, around the hardscape, I've placed some Stergine repens, and I'm really happy with the growth of this plant. It's really crisp, the leaves are super fresh and green, and I'm loving that. On the hardscape, I've actually put some Ricardia moss. Yeah, it's doing really well, and it just keeps growing. It's quite a slow grower, but in my tank it seems to be growing quite fast, in fact, so super happy with that as well. In the back of the tank I've got some just easy stem plants, not worth talking about really, but they just kind of intake excess nutrients and help with the tank, because the more plant mass in your tank the better, I suppose. I've also got a couple other plants, some Cryptocorini behind the wood, and a couple other a fern and things like this, but you can't really see those, so I'll not talk about them. There are some plants growing outside the water column. I've got a little piece of driftwood with some moss on it, as well as next to it there's some Lobelia cardinalis dwarf, I believe it's pronounced, and it's growing really well. It's a really good plant if you're wanting to start off growing something immersed. It grows quite robust above water, and it looks kind of cool with these like coin-shaped leaves. So overall, I'm really happy with how this tank has progressed. Super happy with the plant growth, and I'm really happy with how the UG carpet is spreading out and becoming really thick and compact. If you've enjoyed this video, then why don't you give me a thumbs up, and if you've got any comments about anything I've talked about today, or any aquascaping comments in general, then leave me a comment in the comments below. It means a lot to me, and I'll be sure to answer any comments you have. And I guess I'll see you next time in the next video. See ya.